Hello everybody, and welcome to this, my first of two videos on the Nikon FM, right there. So before we get going, if you learn better having something to read, or to read as well as watch a video, I do have links in the video's description to a print book and a Kindle book that you can purchase to go alongside this video. It has all the same content presented in it as just another way for you to learn about this camera. I'd show you what they look like, but I don't have a pre-production version of them just yet. The Nikon FM is a fully manual interchangeable lens 35mm SLR. What does that mean? Fully manual means that all of the controls on it are manual. Whether the photos turn out or don't turn out is going to be completely on you and how you interpret the settings, or the meter reading to create the settings. It has interchangeable lens, means that the lenses can be taken off and a different one can be put on at any time when you're not taking a photo, and it won't affect your film. I definitely don't recommend taking lenses on and off while you take photos, as that can cause harm to your mechanism. 35mm means it can take any 35mm film. And single lens reflex, SLR, means it has a single lens. Light travels through the lens to a mirror inside the camera, up to this reflex pentaprism, and then to your eye, and you see exactly what the film is going to see until the moment that you take the photo. The Nikon FM uses a center-weighted 12mm TTL meter. Okay, what does that mean? TTL means through the lens. The light coming through the lens is what's going to be used for metering. 12mm means that an area about 12mm, roughly that size, in the center of your frame is center-weighted for your meter. So the majority of your metering information comes from the center of the frame, and the balance comes from outside the center of the frame. It has shutter speeds of bulb, then 1 second to 1/1000th of a second, 0.86x viewfinder magnification with 93% frame coverage. What that means is that when you look through your viewfinder, what you see is 86% of the size of what will be on the film, and that's pretty good for manual focus. And that 93% of the frame will be in your viewfinder. So let's imagine what you see right now is what's going to be on the film. 93% coverage means that about 3.5% on each side, and the top and bottom, will be on your film, but not in your viewfinder. So if something's a little bit cockeyed in your viewfinder, that's no problem. You have a little bit of room to crop it in post. This comes with a fixed focusing screen that is a standard Nikon Type K split prism. The flash sync speed on this camera is 1/125th of a second, and it is one of the most reliable cameras ever made. It features metal gearing, a ball bearing mounted shutter, and a very nicely machined body. These have held up beautifully still today in 2023 as I record this. The market for the Nikon FM was the advanced amateur, or it could also have been a pretty good backup body for a professional photographer, but generally speaking, by the time these came out, professionals were looking for automatic exposure modes, which this didn't have, meaning this really was well suited for advanced but amateur users. It directly replaced the Nikon Nicomat, or Nicormat, Nicormat, however it's pronounced, FT3. It is relatively compact compared to other SLRs of its time. It used a copper selenium chassis that became the Nikon standard through the entire FE, FM, and series, and then into the FA, and even for the FM3A. And this was, as I mentioned, also used as a professional backup body. This was made by Nikon in Japan from 1977 until 1982. It was preceded by the FT3 and followed by the FM2. Now, as we do, we'll go through all of the features on the camera, starting here with the top. And over here, well, technically on the front, we have the strap lugs right here. This is what you would connect your camera strap to. Over here, we have the film rewind knob and lever that we'll use to rewind the film in the second video. And we have this little lock right here that is the film knob unlock, that pushing it towards the back of the camera allows us to lift the film knob so that we can open the film back. Here we have the film plane indicator. This is what we would use to know exactly where the film plane is so that we can take detailed measurements for things like microscopy. Flash hot shoe. Shutter speed index right here so that we know what shutter speed we're set at. Shutter speed dial. ASA selection. To adjust your ASA, you simply lift the ring and rotate it like this. ASA and ISO are the exact same. So if you're using 400 ISO film, you simply set your ASA to 400. This is your double exposure lever right here. Film advance lever, shutter button, shutter locking collar, just like that, frame count window, meter on indicator. Now, as a note, and thank you to Chuck Gines for reminding me of this, on Nikon FMs that have a serial number of starting with 2, you can use the shutter with the film advance lever in towards the camera. On Nikon FMs where the serial number starts with 1, the lever has to be popped out. So we already know this has a serial number that starts with 2. On the camera's front, we have a few different things. We have the self-timer lever right here, and this serves a single function to give us self-timer capability. And as you might notice, the mirror pops up when the self-timer starts, which is nice because that means that when the self-timer is done, there won't be any mirror-related shake. And what that means is that you can use this for things like star trails or microscopy or macro work, where you don't want to have a mirror shake at the beginning of your photo. This is the depth of field preview lever. We're going to do a whole lot of pretending about this depth of field preview lever because I guess I'm using it right now just fine. When I bought this camera, it did not have one, and finding a depth of field preview lever for it was a bit of a pain, but I did, and it just happens to fit a bit snugly, and not every lens likes it. But we'll give it a try. Anyway, lens mount, lens aperture coupling pin. This connects to your lens to give you an aperture, to communicate the aperture to your camera. This little button right here allows you to push this pin out of the way so that you can mount NAI lenses, which we'll see in the second video. That little black dot right there is the lens mounting index, lens lock pin, lens release button. And then over here we have the flash PC port. PC stands for Pronter Comper, not personal computer. But you can connect a flash to this, and we'll see that in the second video. On the camera's back, not a whole lot to see. We have the viewfinder window right here, Nikon, model number FM, serial number, film memo holder. When you take your film out of 35mm film out of the box, you tear the cap off the box, and you just put that little flap right in here, and it will tell you what type of film you have and how many frames are on that roll. The camera's bottom has a few things to note. Here we have the motor drive mechanical coupling. If you have the motor drive, which I do not, so I can't demonstrate it, when you connect it to the camera, this is the mechanical coupling that it uses to advance the film. Film rewind button, tripod socket, so you can connect a tripod or your tripod quick release plate here. Battery chamber, made in Japan. Motor drive electronic contacts. These electronic contacts tell the motor drive when to fire so that it advances the film. To get inside of the camera, we push this locking mechanism toward the back of the camera and lift the film rewind knob. Then we lift this all the up further and the film back will pop open. Inside of the camera we have the film cassette chamber here, and we'll see how to load film and video too. Film guide pin. This helps the film move out of the cassette and into the rest of the camera smoothly. These 4 silver guide rails help keep the film flat as they move through the camera. The outer 2 prevent the film from moving up and down, and then the inner 2, as we'll see in just a moment, sandwich the film up against the film pressure plate in the back of the camera so that it is flat and properly aligned for focusing the image. Shutter. Film tension sprocket right here. This spins as the camera is advanced, so that the film has tension on it and moves through the camera properly. Film take-up spool right here. This takes up the spool as you advance the film. Here we have a little pin. We're going to push that down, and now we can take the back of the camera off, so we can see how the back of the camera lines up with the rest of it. This little roller right here nests right here, and that puts tension on the film so that the sprocket holes on the film engage the sprockets here. Film pressure plate. This rests right here, as you can see, and is what keeps the film flat as it moves through the camera. And then we've got a little spring right here, and that's used to keep the cassette properly aligned so that the film can be taken off of it and rewound onto it smoothly. To remount the back of the camera, we simply do the exact opposite as we did to take it off. Retract the pin into the hinge, and then let go once we have it lined up. That's that. I do have some tips on how to use your Nikon FM. It has a center-weighted meter, so the best thing I can say for that is learn to use the center-weighted meter to dial in your settings and then recompose. What do I mean by that? You can see here we have a scene with some gray, with some midtones in the table, and then some bright highlights in the camera's chrome, and then some real dark areas in the black parts of the camera. If we created an image that looked like this, the majority of the metering data would come from the lens here, which is very dark. But we don't want this to be if we took a photo with this meter reading, this very dark area would be too bright. We don't want that. So what you could do with your camera is recompose so that the center of the frame is over some of the mid-tone wood grain that you like, then bring your camera back in line to how you want the image to look and take your photo. You take your meter reading off of the mid-tone here, and then you compose your image as you want it to be, like that, so that the darks that are here are properly dark. These highlights here are properly highlighted, not super blown out. And then the midtones here are properly mid-toned, not very bright. So that's the best tip I can give you. Manual cameras like this make it very easy to obtain the exact exposure you want. And once you've learned how to work your meter and do things like that, you will be able to take photos as quickly with this camera as you are with a Nikon FE, for example. What you can do with this is if you're in a setting where light isn't changing, get a good meter reading. Set your shutter speed how you want it. Set your aperture how you want it. Now you've got your settings dialed in, and you can just focus and take photos as quickly as needed with that setting. It's a really good way to do street photography as an example. There are some things not to do with your camera. Don't store your camera with your shutter ready to fire. Always trigger the shutter before you put it away. And the reason for that is this is entirely mechanical. So when you advance the shutter, you put tension on a bunch of springs inside of the camera. If those springs rest with tension on them, it can affect your shutter timing accuracy, or worse, fatigue them and cause them to break, which will brick your camera. Either situation, not great, requires a repair. Don't touch the shutter that's inside the camera. It's a leaf style shutter, so if you get your finger oils on it, it can jam. If you accidentally flex the leaves and they get out of alignment, when you take a photo, they can run into each other, and that can ruin your shutter leaves. And that's a good way to brick your shutter and cause you to have an expensive repair of replacing the shutter. Don't touch the mirror that's behind the lens, because that can lead to the mirror being desilvered, which will affect your ability to focus and meter accurately. Don't leave your camera in your car, because the heat and the cold can affect the lubricating oils in the lens or in the camera body. If it gets really hot, those lubricating oils will get thin and get to places they shouldn't be. Back at normal temperature and they're at their proper viscosity, now they are places they shouldn't be, and that can affect your camera's function. That's especially true with aperture leaves on your lenses, which you might be able to see there. Okay. If it gets really cold, that can cause your lubricating oils either in your lens or camera to get thick and gummy and break down, and then they don't work like they should either. Also, leaving this in your car, really great way to come out to no window and no camera. Don't store your camera or your lenses in a plastic bag or box unless you have a rechargeable desiccant pack that you keep recharged. Plastic is moisture permeable, and moisture can get into that box or bag and can cause fungus to grow on your optics or mildew to grow in your leather covering, and both of those are really bad situations for your enjoyment of using your camera. And don't let your Nikon FM get wet. It's not weather sealed, and water in the housing of your camera can affect its performance, potentially even ruin the camera. Just remember, your camera is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect, and as long as you take care of your Nikon FM will take care of you. So that's it for my first video. We talked about what everything is. In the second video, we're going to talk about how to use everything on this camera and how to do everything that you can do with this camera. See you there.